Sawadee Ka. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon in English study group, and we're in volume 10, chapters 41 through 46. We're going to be finishing up this book today, and next week we're going to be moving into volume 11, which is titled The Realms of Existence. So welcome to all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. We just have about 6 chapters that we're going to be studying today, where normally we'll study 10, but since we're finishing up this book, we're just going to finish it up to this 46th chapter. The way that we do this program is I invite students in Zoom to be able to volunteer to read a chapter, and then after someone reads it, I will share some teachings on that. After I share teachings, anybody and everybody can ask any and all questions that you like, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. You can put that into the comment section, or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. So is there anybody in Zoom that would like to volunteer to read this first chapter? All right, it looks like Pat has his hand up. Go ahead, sir.
Wisdom, mindfulness, and name and form stopped by the stopping of consciousness. Wisdom and mindfulness, said Venerable Ajita, and name and form, sir, tell me when asked, where is this stopped? I shall answer this question which you have asked, Ajita. Where name and form is completely stopped, by the stopping of consciousness, there it is stopped. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So this particular chapter, a ordained practitioner who happens to be a female is asking the Buddha, where is it that consciousness is, where is it that name and form is stopped? And what she's basically asking is, where is it that the end of the cycle of rebirth occurs? Because what name and form is the physical body. She's asking, where is it that we no longer pick up this physical body? And the Buddha is saying, well, if there's no consciousness, then there's not going to be this name and form. That's where name and form is completely stopped, where consciousness is stopped. So if there's no spawning of a new consciousness, then that consciousness doesn't exist. So therefore, it's not going to pick up a new body, which is a name and form. And for anybody who understands dependent origination and have studied that, you know that consciousness then leads to the name and form. So sometimes what people might ask is, okay, well, if we need to end consciousness in order to end the cycle of rebirth, how do we end that? And that's where you go back to volitional formations, which are choices and decisions. And then you go back to ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, where you now cultivate wisdom. By cultivating wisdom and training your mind, eliminating craving and clinging, that's what's going to stop consciousness. Because the fuel that causes the consciousness to continue to exist over and over and over again, it is the craving and the clinging. The Buddha talks in other discourses where he shares that craving is the fuel that causes the consciousness to continue to exist over and over and over again. So if you get to the end of this life and there's still craving, desire, attachment in the mind, then that's the cause and condition that's going to lead to the very next consciousness. So you'd like to get to the point where you've trained the mind where you no longer have any cravings, desires, attachments, and you'll know that you're doing that because you'll see your discontentedness gradually diminishing. That in situations where you're once angry or frustrated, you'll be in those same situations and you won't have that anger and frustration because you've eliminated the cravings, desires, attachments. So an analogy that you can think of that helps you to understand how craving, desire, attachment leads to this continued consciousness is that if you had a fire that was burning with logs, these logs are the fuel. And as those logs are burning, they're sending off sparks, being carried by the wind. And now when that spark lands, it ignites a new fire. So this spark in this new fire, it isn't the same fire as before. It's a completely new fire. But there was a cause and condition that led to the starting of this new fire. The cause and condition was that the original fire or the previous fire had fuel. And as long as there's fuel, there's going to be sparks that come off of that. And now there's going to be a new fire. But if you get rid of the fuel, meaning if you get rid of the logs and there's no more logs that are put in this fire and they're all exhausted, now there's no sparks coming off of that fire. So therefore, there can't be any new fires from that particular fire. So that's why we refer to craving, anger, and ignorance as the 3 unwholesome roots, the 3 poisons, or the 3 fires, because these are the fires that are burning inside the mind that are sending off sparks. And now if there's craving, desire, attachment at the end of your life, or you're craving anything, that's going to be the cause and condition that's going to lead to the next consciousness, the continuation of this consciousness. So this is one of the reasons why you're so focused on eliminating craving, desire, attachment, because it's leading to the elimination of discontentedness. And having done so, it will then produce the elimination of the consciousness, and there won't be any further rebirths in the cycle of rebirth. The Buddha doesn't describe what comes next. Once an individual gets into the enlightened mental state and dies, he leaves this as an undeclared teaching. But we know someone that is enlightened that dies, they're not going to experience rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. But that's different than saying that this being completely doesn't exist anymore anywhere, because the Buddha never said that. And sometimes you will see that in people that are discussing the teachings of the Buddha. They will say that if you get to enlightenment, that you absolutely don't exist. Or some people will say you go to some pure land of the Buddhas or something like this. You'll hear all kinds of different things. But the Buddha never actually describes what comes next for an individual who actually gets to enlightenment. This is an undeclared teaching. So name and form is the physical body, and that's from dependent origination. And this student is saying, hey, where is that stopped? And the Buddha says, where name and form is stopped, where the physical body no longer comes into existence, is where the consciousness or the mind is stopped. And then that's where you need to know the other teachings of the Buddha, where he helps you to understand that it's craving, desire, attachment that is the fuel that keeps this consciousness going. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, David. So from what I understand the part where it maybe is an undeclared teaching that we don't know whether something exists or not, does not exist, but it seems to be you're saying that from what you just described that there might be something that exists even after the enlightened person dies.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that what you hear frequently in different places is that people will say, if you get to enlightenment, that that this being is basically extinguished and no longer exists. So in this situation, this individual hasn't seen what the Buddha taught about what happens for a being that is enlightened. He leaves this as an undeclared teaching. He definitely says that this being no longer exists in the cycle of rebirth, but he doesn't say what may or may not come next.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But there definitely isn't the causes and conditions for this consciousness to continue, right? There's not a continuous stream after that. The stream has been eliminated.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one. Is there someone who would like to read this one? This is chapter 42.
Yeah, I can read it.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Vibhav.
Without clinging, one attains nirvana, enlightenment. Here, Ananda, a monk is practicing thus. If it were not, it would not be mine. It will not be, and it will not be mine. What exists, what has come to be, that I am abandoning. Thus it contains equanimity. He does not see excitement in that equanimity, welcome it, or remain holding to it. Since he does not do so, his consciousness does not become dependent on it. He does not cling to it. A monk, Ananda, who is without clinging, attains nirvana, enlightenment.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here the Buddha is just making it clear that an enlightened being doesn't have any clinging whatsoever. He's using some various words here that are insightful to help you understand what you need to do on this path. Right here, where he's talking about that essentially it would not be mine, it will not be, and it will not be mine. What he's talking about here is nothing that you have is truly yours. You might think that this is your car or your clothes or your phone or your money, but it actually doesn't belong to you because you can't keep it permanently. And when we have that mindset that these things are mine and they belong to me, then there's clinging in the mind. And as long as there's clinging to any of these things, you can't be permanently peaceful and joyful, because you'll cling to these things wanting them to be permanent. And then because they are impermanent and they're gone, now the mind will experience those painful feelings like frustration, agitation, annoyance, and others. So you need to get to the point where you understand that essentially all these things that you have in your life, you're essentially a caretaker. You're like a landlord. You're kind of like, or I should say, you're kind of like a tenant, that you're just kind of renting these things in the way that you can really think about it. Because if you cling to any of the things that you have, whether it's relationships or your job or your material possessions or even your thoughts or ideas, even here, the Buddha talks about clinging to equanimity would cause the mind to not experience enlightenment, essentially, is what he's saying. So as one eliminates their clinging, realizing that all of these things that are around you don't belong to you, then you can abandon all that clinging and the mind can be purified. And more, you'll notice equanimity in the mind. The equanimity is the calmness and composure, the evenness of temper, even in difficult situations. So when this equanimity is starting to come into the mind, because it's going to start peering through the mind when you are experiencing the jhanas, those preliminary phases that the mind's experiencing before it gets to the first stage of enlightenment, you'll have a significant amount of equanimity at that point. Your mind will be composed and steady and stable. And this is something very different than what you've experienced in the past, where in the past, if you got a phone call that your mom was in a terrible car accident and was being rushed to the hospital in the back of an ambulance, you might have been really shaken up by that. But now when these kinds of things are happening, your mind's going to be quite stable and quite steady. And it's probably going to feel a bit odd for you at first, because you're used to associating that shaken up feeling that you experience with mom was hurt with your love. You might think that that's because of the love. And if your mind thinks that way, then when you're stable and steady, you might think that somehow the love is gone. But this isn't true. What's eliminating and what's diminishing is your attachment to mom. And you understand she is impermanent. So in a situation where mom dies or mom's sick or other people in your life, and your mind is quite calm and quite steady and peaceful, you can see that, of course, you love this person, meaning you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well, but your mind just isn't shaken up with the day-to-day things that they're encountering, because you understand that they are impermanent. So as you eliminate clinging to all things, you're going to notice more and more equanimity, this steadiness and stableness, this calmness and composure coming into the mind. So the Buddha is saying that you don't seek excitement in this equanimity, meaning clinging to it, because as you're making your way to enlightenment, there's these certain qualities that are going to start peering through the mind, and they're not yet permanent. They're either on or they're off. So you can go through a couple of days or a couple of weeks, even a couple of months, where you're having things like peacefulness, equanimity, joy. You can notice tranquility in the mind, all these different qualities, and they'll be on. They didn't arise and they're not changing. It's just that they're on all the time from the moment you wake up until you're going to sleep. But then at some point, one of your cravings are going to get triggered, and that equanimity or that peacefulness and the joy is going to be gone. It's not going to slowly fade away. It's just going to gone in an instant, right? So if you cling to any of these wholesome qualities, these qualities of mind that are starting to peer through, that are part of the enlightened mind as you're getting these glimpses, if you cling to any of them, or as the Buddha's saying here, welcome it or remain holding to it, then when it's gone, you're going to feel painful feelings because you're clinging to the qualities of the enlightened mind. So you need to get to the point where when this equanimity is coming up, when this peacefulness, when this joy is coming up, it's kind of like you have a little smile on your face. It's like, yeah, I see you there. I see that equanimity. I see what's happening there. But you don't, have this excitement. You don't remain holding on to this, because you're going to see various qualities starting to shine through more and more. So since he does not do so, meaning he does not cling to these qualities, his consciousness does not become dependent on it, and he does not cling to it. You're not interested in being dependent on anything whatsoever. Dependent is just another word for craving and clinging and attachment. That's all that word means, is that if you were dependent on somebody, that means that you can't go forward in life without this thing or without this person, right? So you would like to get to the point where you have people in your life, you have material possessions in your life, you have a certain amount of wealth or income or material possessions, but you're not dependent on these things, that you could sustain your life without these things. That, of course, not all of them are going to be gone at the same time. But, if you have a certain phone and now you have this mobile phone, if you're dependent on it, it's like, oh my goodness, I can't conduct life without this phone. And now you're all shaken up when it's gone. So you would like to not have that dependency. And one of the things you can do is you can back up your contacts, you can back up your scheduling information. So, hey, if something happens to your phone, because someday it will, because it is impermanent, now you've got a backup copy of it, right? Your mind can reside peaceful and joyful because you know that you have your bases covered, right? But even if your phone died and your computer crashed where your backup was, your mind's still not shaken up by that either, that your mind can still be calm and peaceful. So the Buddha is saying, okay, one who doesn't cling, who is without clinging, this individual has attained nibbana. And you'll know this because your mind's becoming more and more peaceful for elongated periods of time. You'll notice 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, your mind doesn't have any anger, sadness, frustration, no discontent feelings whatsoever. It's just completely steady and stable and calm. And you notice that there's joy and cheerfulness and gladness. You can enjoy all aspects of life. You're living the ideal life by the time you get to enlightenment, and you're just enjoying every aspect of life. You're having fun with everything, and you don't have any even slightest dislike towards other people. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So it looks like Vibhav, maybe you have a question? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the equanimity part of it. Like when you say that, like in the fourth jhana, it says that you have like equanimity is well established, and you won't get shaken up by extreme events. It's not sometimes quite clear like what level of equanimity you will have, because it seems to me that there's still, because you still have craving, and even in the first stage of enlightenment, there's sensual desires and other things. It seems to me that there'll still be some craving that will occur and that will still shake up your mind. So when we say that there's equanimity is well established and you're peaceful and you're not shaken up by external events, like what level of equanimity are we talking about here?
Yeah, so that all the qualities of enlightenment are not yet permanent until the mind is actually enlightened, when it's in that fourth stage of enlightenment. So you're going to have equanimity, but we can't really quantify, like if I told you that you have a level of 8 of equanimity, that doesn't mean anything to you, right? So these qualities are going to be peering through more and more, but you can't really quantify them, and they're not yet permanent until you actually get to the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind's actually enlightened. But you'll see these qualities peering through more and more, and as you're experiencing the jhanas and the first stage of enlightenment, you'll see for yourself what your mind is experiencing, and it'll be night and day compared to what you've experienced in the past.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's go to the next one. This is chapter 43. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Yihang. All right, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. By not clinging, they are freed. Clinging, they look upon with fear, for it produces birth and death. And by not clinging, they are freed. In the destruction of birth and death, they reside in joy, for they are safe, and reach Nibbana, enlightenment, here and now. They are beyond all fear and hate. They have escaped all discontentedness. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Yihang. So this is just another short discourse where the Buddha is saying, okay, clinging they look upon with fear. What he's essentially saying here is that someone who understands the path to enlightenment and they understand what craving and clinging does to the mind, that you essentially despise craving and clinging. You're disinterested in craving and clinging whatsoever, that the mind just is turning away from it because you see what it does to your mind, you see what it does to your relationships, you see what it does to your moral conduct, and you're just disinterested in it whatsoever. That's what he's saying here. And he understands that by the time an individual understands that they understand that this clinging produces birth and death, that you're going to keep coming back over and over and over and over and over again. And this is one of the reasons why you're disinterested in this. And this is something that you would have independently verified to be able to get to this point in time. And then by not clinging, an individual is freed from the mind being bound up and having all these discontent feelings. Because when your mind is clinging, your mind is not free. It's just a matter of time before something you're clinging to is no longer available because of impermanence, or it breaks, or you misplace it, or what have you, and now your mind's shaken up. But when you eliminate that clinging, now your mind is free, that it's not shaken up at all. And then the Buddha is saying here, in the destruction of birth and death, they reside in joy, for they are safe. So when you eliminate the craving and clinging and the mind is free, you will know not only is the mind enlightened because it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years since you've experienced any discontentedness, but you'll also know that you're not going to be coming back into the world again, because you will have already by that time independently verified dependent origination and all these other teachings. Your mind in the enlightened mental state will reside in that joy, and it'll be completely safe. It'll be completely protected. It doesn't matter what's going on around you, that your mind's going to always be peaceful and glad and cheerful, bright and uplifted. And of course, the Buddha ends this part of it with saying, and reach nibbana or enlightenment here and now, because the mind has eliminated craving and clinging. And now, having gotten to enlightenment, this individual is beyond all fear and hate. There's no discontentedness in the mind whatsoever, and there's no hatred. Oftentimes people think that hatred is coming from other people, or like if you like somebody or you dislike somebody, oftentimes people think this is coming from the other person. But you need to be able to see that it's your own mind that's producing this. There are certain wants and expectations, essentially certain clinging that the mind has. And if people meet your wants and expectations and what you're clinging to, then you'll like them. But if they don't meet your expectations of what you want, you'll hate them, or you'll despise them, or you will dislike them. And this is coming from your own mind. By the time you eliminate all of that and you understand impermanence, that everybody is different, everybody is unique because of the universal truth of impermanence, and that's what makes the world wonderful, then you get to the point where, yeah, people might do things that you disagree with, but you don't hate them. You don't need to hate them, because the hate isn't helping anything whatsoever. It's just getting in your way of having joy and peace all day long. So by the time you eliminate all your clinging, not only is there no more fear, but there's no more hatred or any of the other lesser versions, like even the slightest dislike. And that's where the Buddha sums this up with saying, okay, this individual has escaped all discontentedness. Do you guys have any questions on this chapter? Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So is there someone who would like to read this next chapter, chapter 44? Okay, looks like Pat would like to volunteer to read this one. Go ahead, sir.
Calm and reflection have part in true wisdom. Monks, these two qualities have part in true wisdom. What two? Calm and reflection. If cultivated, what profit does calm attain? The mind is cultivated. What profit results from a cultivated mind? All craving is abandoned. Monks, if reflection is cultivated, what profit does it attain? Wisdom is cultivated. If wisdom is cultivated, what profit does it attain? All ignorance is abandoned. A mind defiled by craving is not liberated, and wisdom defiled by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, is not developed. Thus, monks, through the fading away of craving, there is liberation of mind, and through the fading away of ignorance, unknowing of true reality, there is liberation by wisdom. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here the Buddha is providing two qualities that you need to cultivate in your journey to enlightenment and helping you to see the benefit of having done so. So these two qualities that he's going to introduce, he's saying this is what's going to help you to get to true wisdom, because that's the ultimate goal on this path, is to cultivate the mind's wisdom about the natural laws around you. There are certain natural laws that are affecting you, whether you're aware of these natural laws or not. And having the wisdom of these natural laws, now you can navigate the world peacefully and joyfully. But if you don't have the wisdom of these natural laws, you'll struggle and have difficulties. That's what the stress and the anxiety and the anger and the frustration, that's the mind being discontent because it's living in a world that it doesn't understand. It doesn't understand these natural laws. So everything the Buddha is teaching you is all about getting to wisdom, or sometimes he refers to it as true wisdom, meaning you've independently verified that what you are learning and understanding is actually true through independently verifying it in your day-to-day life. So there's these two qualities of calm and reflection that are going to lead to this true wisdom. So the first one, he's talking about calm, and he's saying, what's the profit that it attains? Essentially, he's saying, what's the benefit that calm leads to? Well, if you can maintain your calmness and your composure, essentially that equanimity, well, that's going to lead to a cultivated mind, that the mind can be developed, where you can now have control and discipline of the mind. And what does that lead to, where you have control and discipline of the mind? Well, it leads to the elimination of all craving. Because the only reason why the mind is not calm is because it's craving. The mind is longing, yearning, it's pulling in all these different directions. It's kind of like animals being tied to, and kind of pulling in all these different directions. If they had a rope and they were tied up all in a knot, they would be pulling in all these different directions. And now whichever animal is strongest, it's going to drag all the other animals in that direction, right? So if you can maintain your calmness and your composure, that's going to help the mind to have more cultivation or development or discipline. And now with that discipline, whenever you see the mind craving, meaning pulling in the direction of the objects of its affection, you pull it back. You pull it back. So you see the mind longing, yearning, like, oh, I really want to get that money. Oh, I want that money so bad. And you understand that, hey, that's impermanent. It's not going to lead to permanent peace and permanent joy. So you restrain the mind and you pull it back, maintaining your calmness and composure. Or you're like, oh, look at that beautiful man or that beautiful woman. Oh, let me chase after that for a while. And now you realize that your mind's longing and yearning for that, and you pull the mind back. And this is going to help to maintain your calmness and composure. And it's ultimately going to help you to eliminate your craving so that your mind is no longer longing and yearning. So this calmness, this equanimity is going to develop the mind to have control and discipline so that you can restrain the mind and eliminate these cravings. Now the Buddha is talking about reflection. What reflection is where you're looking inward and you're being introspective. You're looking at the things that you've been doing in your day-to-day life and trying to determine what is wise and unwise. Because there are certain things that the Buddha is teaching you in his teachings, but then you need to look at these things yourself. He's not telling you like every single little thing that would be wise or unwise. You need to cultivate this wisdom through looking at your own life and looking inward and being introspective. So say maybe once a week or at the end of your work day, when you've had, a certain number of meetings or something like this, you might look over your day or look over your week and think about, what things went well this week or what things went really well today. And you look at all these things that you made decisions about and how they turned out to be wholesome, that you experienced wholesome results or wholesome karma. But then you need to look at your day or your week and say, what were the unwise decisions that I made that turned out to be unwholesome results or unwholesome karma? And now what that's going to do is this introspection and reflection, it's going to help you to cultivate wisdom. Because the natural law of karma is affecting you whether you're aware of it or not, and it's the most unbiased teacher you will ever find. If you look at your life and you see unwholesome things that are occurring, then that means there was unwise decisions that you made that led to it. And if you see wholesome things that are occurring in your life, that means there were certain wise decisions that you made that led to those. So the way that you cultivate this wisdom is not only through examining and investigating the teachings of the Buddha, reflecting on those and practicing them, but as you're doing this throughout your day-to-day life, you need to relate it to what's going on in your day-to-day life. Look over your day, look over your week, try to figure out what are the wholesome and unwholesome things that have been occurring, and figure out what are the wise decisions and the unwise decisions you're making that are leading to this. And if you can't figure that out, that's where you have a teacher to come ask for help. and you share with us the things that you're experiencing, and we will help you to figure out what are the decisions that you're making, either wisely or unwisely. Because those wise decisions, you would like to continue making those so that you can continue to experience more and more wholesome karma or wholesome results. But those unwise decisions, you're interested in extinguishing those and eliminating those. Because by cultivating this wisdom, what the Buddha is now saying is, well, what's the benefit of doing that by cultivating wisdom? Well, it's going to eliminate this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality. In order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to make wise decisions for a consistent long-term period. We're talking about years, right? It's going to take you multiple months, maybe even a year or two, maybe even longer, to get up and running on the Eightfold Path, to be able to deeply understand the Eightfold Path, commit it to your mind, memorize it, and then actually be practicing it and tweaking it and getting it better and better. So as you get up and running on the Eightfold Path, then you're going to need to live your life that way for multiple years. So the wisdom that you're cultivating is you're cultivating the wisdom initially of the Eightfold Path and getting your mind up to that point so that your practice is such that you're practicing all those factors of the Eightfold Path. And now getting up and running on the Eightfold Path, doing that for multiple years, as all this unwholesome karma is coming back to you from old decisions that you've made in the past, now you extinguish that through making wise decisions. But you need to be able to look at your day-to-day life. You need to be able to look at what you're experiencing and figure out what are the wise and unwise decisions that you're making that are leading to it. Because when you abandon and eliminate ignorance, now more and more the mind's becoming wise, and you're making wiser and wiser and wiser choices, which are leading to more and more wholesome outcomes. It's kind of like if you were walking down the beach and you were kicking up sand and the wind kept blowing it back in your face. You'd be like, what's going on here? Why is this sand keep blowing back in my face? Oh, I'm kicking up the sand, so it's blowing back in my face. Let me stop doing that, right? So now you've got wisdom. As a kid, we didn't know that, so maybe we walked down the beach and we were kicking up sand. But now as an adult, we've learned, that's unwise. We should walk kind of slowly and steadily through the beach in the sand, so we're not kicking up sand on us, but we're not kicking up sand on other people as well. Right? So this is what you need to do with all aspects of your life, not just walking down the beach with sand, but any particular thing that is occurring in your life. You'd like to look at the wholesome results, the unwholesome results, and figure out what are the wise and unwise decisions that are leading to that. And that's what's going to lead to this wisdom. And that's going to lead to the elimination of ignorance. So the calm mind leads to the control and the development. And then that's going to help you to eliminate the craving, because now you can restrain the mind. Doing the reflection where you're being introspective and inward looking, that's going to help you cultivate the wisdom to know what's wise and unwise. And now that's going to lead to the elimination of ignorance. And this is what will lead to your enlightenment, along with all the other things that you need to be able to learn and practice. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to chapter 45. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, it looks like Yihang is interested to read.
Thank you, Teacher David. Sorry, just 1 second. The motivation. Monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. This is the cause of discontentedness. This is the elimination of discontentedness. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Thus, monks, I have taught you the destination and the path leading to the destination. Whatever should be done, monks, by a compassionate teacher out of compassion for his disciples, aspiring for their welfare, that I have done for you. These are the feet of trees, monks. These are empty huts. Meditate, monks. Do not be complacent, lest you regret it later. This is my instruction to you. Why is that? Because he is out of the evil one's range. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So here, this first paragraph, this first statement that the Buddha is making, is he's saying that you should make this effort to understand the Four Noble Truths. That's where you can have the breakthrough to understanding the problem, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. That's the very beginning of the path to enlightenment. Without understanding the Four Noble Truths, an individual wouldn't be able to make any progress on the path to enlightenment. You would need to be able to firmly understand that and really commit it to your mind and really soak it into your mind so that you understand what is the cause of these discontent feelings. Because how could you ever eliminate them if you didn't understand what the cause is? So the Buddha is typically encouraging you to make an effort to understand the Four Noble Truths because you have this wonderful human life. This is the ideal life to be able to now make your way to enlightenment. So instead of allowing this life to go to waste or being complacent, lacking initiative or willingness to do something or motivation, instead the Buddha is encouraging you to make an effort to learn and understand the Four Noble Truths. And then having understood that, the Buddha is then saying, okay, what he's done is he's taught this destination. What the destination is he's taught this enlightened mental state. It's not a physical destination. It's a mental destination that the mind can understand this destination to enlightenment. This is the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. There's no discontent feelings in the enlightened mind. All the anger, sadness, frustration, and everything else has been eliminated because you've purified the mind and there's no longer the causes and conditions in the mind that are producing those feelings. The mind is focused, concentrated. You have clarity of mind and deep memory. Your personal and professional relationships will be blossoming. They'll be at ease. And you won't even be in a bad mood any longer because the causes and conditions that are producing that have been uprooted and eliminated. So this is the destination, the mental state of enlightenment. And the Buddha has taught the path that leads to that destination, which is the Eightfold Path. And now he's saying, okay, whatever should be done by a teacher out of compassion for their students, what compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. He's done that for you. Essentially, he aspires for the welfare of all beings. And of course, his students during that lifetime, he's done what he needed to do in order to share these teachings with others. Because he was a king, he was a prince destined to become a king. When he got to enlightenment, he could have very easily went back to the royal palace and lived a life of luxury and just kind of like relax and be like, all right, this mind's enlightened. There's peace, there's joy. Life is grand, life is wonderful. He could have just, been done at that point. But because of his compassion, because a Buddha has deep compassion and deep loving kindness for all beings in the world, that a Buddha is going to have the concern for the misfortune of others, and that loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. A Buddha really struggles to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. And having done so, they know how difficult and how hard it is to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves. And they know that other people are struggling and they cannot get to enlightenment by themselves. It's not possible. So a Buddha is going to then spend the rest of their life sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people to help them get to enlightenment because they have such deep loving kindness and compassion for the entire world. And they're not interested in seeing other people have to go through that same misery and grief and despair and sorrow that they went through all their lives in their last life as well, and the difficulties and struggles that it took them to get to enlightenment. So a Buddha is attempting to make the path to enlightenment as easy as possible for everybody. They're putting down lights along the path to enlightenment, illuminating it, making it accessible to everybody and anybody who has a sincere interest in learning and practicing the path. So a Buddha is going to have this aspiration for the welfare of their students. They're not attached to their students. They're not longing, yearning. They don't get upset or frustrated when their students are having difficulties or struggles, but instead they have this deep compassion where they have concern for their misfortune. And then what the Buddha typically will encourage students to do is to go meditate. That this is his way of saying that is essentially, these are the foot of trees. These are empty huts. These are places where they would meditate during his lifetime. And he's encouraging you not to be complacent. The complacency would be the dullness, lethargic condition, lack of motivation, willingness to do something. We can understand complacency, like if you weren't meditating for a few days, or you weren't coming to learn the teachings of the Buddha for an extended period of time. This is all complacency. But when the Buddha talks about complacency in detail, he talks about it as if you were walking down the street, essentially, and there was an unwholesome thought that came into your mind and you did nothing about it, the mind is complacent, because you should have enough mindfulness where you're aware of that unwholesome thought and then you apply right effort to cut that off and let it go. So if you're noticing that you're judging other people, you're looking down on people, you need to not be complacent there. Cut that off and let that go. If you're noticing a negative thought where you're having dislike or you're having hatred towards others, you would like to cut that off and let it go. If you're noticing jealousy or resentment coming up in the mind, don't allow the mind to be complacent. Cut that off and let it go. Because if you allow the mind to stay wired this way, where it's having these thoughts and these conditioned feelings, it's just going to keep doing that. It's going to dwell in that. So you've got to cut that off as easy as possible, as quick as possible, so that you don't allow the mind to stay wired that way. So this is the Buddha motivating and saying, hey, this is what you should be doing in order to make your way to enlightenment. But of course, you're going to need more than just meditation to make your way to enlightenment. But having gotten to enlightenment and having students make their way towards enlightenment, what the Buddha is saying here is that you're now out of the evil one's range. Here he's referring to Mara. Some people refer to this being as the devil or Satan or Lucifer or something like that. This is a formless being that doesn't have physical form, that's interested in causing calamity in the world, interested in causing unwholesome things to occur. This being can influence you, but it can't control you and force you to do certain things. It's just like a friend. If there was a certain friend who was into drugs or alcohol or things like this, or unwise or unwholesome things, they're like, hey, let's go over here and steal this car. You need to know what's wise and unwise and whether or not you would like to do that or not. They can try to influence you, but it ultimately comes down to your decisions, either wisely or unwisely. And it's the same thing with this being. This being can essentially put thoughts into your mind and have you think certain things. And now it's up to your wisdom to decide what you will or will not do. And this being is going to constantly try to influence you as long as you're not in the jhanas. That prior to the jhanas, this being can influence you. But once you're in the jhanas, the Buddha describes this as having blindfolded this being, because this being knows that you have too much wisdom at that point. It doesn't even try to influence you. So you're going to need to have enough wisdom that you, as you're having thoughts, not only your own thoughts, but this particular being is tempting you, or maybe even friends or family members or coworkers or neighbors are kind of tempting you with certain things. You need to know what's wise or unwise. So by the time an individual has gotten to the jhanas, they will be out of the range of this unwholesome being, this evil being, this Mara, that they will no longer be interested and able to influence you because they know that you've cultivated too much wisdom by that point. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 45. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to the last question, or the last chapter for this book. This is chapter 46, where we're going to learn about the Buddha's passing. It looks like Vibhav would like to read that. Go ahead, sir.
The Tathagata's final passing. Monks, for this reason, those matters which I have discovered and proclaimed should be thoroughly learned by you, practiced, developed, and cultivated, so that this holy life may endure for a long time, that it may be for the benefit and peacefulness of the multitude, many people, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit and peacefulness of heavenly beings and humans. And what are those matters? They are the foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases of mental power, the 5 spiritual faculties, the 5 mental powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the Noble Eightfold Path. And now, monks, I declare to you, all conditioned things are of nature to decay. Strive on untiringly. The Tathagata's final passing will not be long delayed. 3 months from now, the Tathagata will take the final Nibbana, final enlightenment. Ripe am in years, my lifespan's determined. Now I go from you, having made myself my refuge. Monks, the untiring, mindful, disciplined, guarding your mind with well-collected thought. He who tirelessly keeps to the guidance and teachings, leaving the birth behind, will put an end to sorrow and despair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So this is a discourse that the Buddha is teaching 3 months prior to his death. He was that enlightened that he knew when he was going to die. He gave his students a 3 months heads up, which was very wise, right? Because if you can imagine, by the time a Buddha gets to the end of their life, there are countless people who are learning with them. Countless people have gotten to enlightenment, but there's also countless people that have still not gotten to enlightenment that are actually learning with an actual Buddha. And some of those people are most likely attached to him, right? And having, him getting ready to die, once he dies, their attachment can be triggered and then they could be discontent. But also, if he just died spontaneously, maybe they had lingering questions that they weren't able to get answered. So the Buddha wisely informed people 3 months before that he was actually going to be dying. And that's what he's doing here. And now not only is he explaining that he's going to die in 3 months, but he's also giving a discourse of saying, what are the teachings that you need to pay attention to in order to develop and cultivate in order to make your way to enlightenment? And here they are. These are like the core central teachings that the Buddha shares. And these are things that I've shared with you guys as well. There's the 4 foundations of mindfulness. There's the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases of mental power, the 5 spiritual faculties, the 5 mental powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is where people will start. And inside the Noble Eightfold Path, you have the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the 4 right efforts, right? These 4 bases of mental power, the 5 spiritual faculties and the 5 mental powers, these are things that you also learn. There's a place in the book series where I call these out. I can't remember if I put it down here or not. I probably did, where I explained what these are. But these are things that you're going to actually be learning along the way that you will have learned by the time you've gotten to this 10th book. But it's not something that you need to learn in this way. Like very rarely do we refer to them in this way, but they're things like concentration and equanimity. They're things like this that you've already learned, but we just very rarely refer to them in this particular way. And then you're also going to need to know the 7 factors of enlightenment. These aren't to determine whether you are enlightened or aren't enlightened. These are actually tools to fine-tune the mind, to bring it from a dull, lethargic, and sluggish state to the middle, and to bring it from an excited, overactive state to the middle. Because as long as you allow the mind to dwell on either side, either dull and lethargic or excited and overactive, the mind's going to keep firing that way. So when you notice that your mind is in those conditions, there's actually teachings that will help you to bring the mind to the middle. And now, being in the middle for longer periods of time, the mind will just stay there. And it's the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the foundation for all of this stuff. And that's why starting tomorrow in the group learning program, I'm going to be doing 3-part series over the next 3 Sundays to deeply penetrate into the Eightfold Path, where I'm going to break it down into each of the 3 sections, and I'm going to spend an entire class session on each individual section. So if you need a refresher on that, or if you've never learned that with me, the next 3 Sundays would be ideal for you to be able to learn. And if you can't attend live, there's the recordings, of course. And if you don't have this committed to your memory yet, you're going to need to do that. One of the things that students will oftentimes do when they first start learning is they will work on studying it and committing it to memory, and then they'll reach out to me and they'll kind of check and confirm that they understand it by almost kind of teaching it to me and kind of walking through as if they're teaching it to me. And then I can help them to be able to see where they're not necessarily understanding certain things. So these are like the core central teachings that the Buddha is sharing that need to be developed. Then here he's talking about how it's important for you to strive on untiringly, because there's a certain struggle in getting to enlightenment. Sometimes when we talk about this peaceful and joyful mental state and getting to it, sometimes people think it's maybe like rose flowers and, rainbows and, clouds and, this journey like that, where, sometimes when you're doing that deep reflection and you're looking inward and your ego's in there trying to pull you in a certain direction and one of your cravings have been triggered and you're all hateful and angry, it can be really challenging on this path. You can start judging other people. I've seen students even study for 2 or 3 years where they're deeply into the teachings, and all of a sudden their conceit starts to arise and they think that they know more than the teacher. And now they're pushing the teacher away. This is why the Buddha teaches to reside as a newly arrived bride, where you always have this respect and gratitude towards the teacher, because oftentimes students can study for 2 or 3 years, start getting peacefulness, starting to get concentration, starting to get joy, and they're starting to experience those heightened qualities from the teachings of a particular teacher, but now their conceit is in there thinking that they know more than the teacher. And next thing you know, they're going out and doing all kinds of unwise things. So you need to strive on with dedication, determination, and diligence, and continue to learn and grow and develop, remaining humble and dedicated to this path, and understanding that there are going to be struggles along the way. But in those struggles, that's where you're cultivating the most wisdom. That's where you're doing the most work. That's where you have the opportunity to make the most improvement and the most progress. Because the only reason why you're struggling is because of lack of wisdom. So whatever that struggle is, work through that struggle, cultivate the wisdom, overcome it, so that the next time you're in that same situation, it won't be a struggle anymore, right? So you would like to maintain your dedication and your diligence, strive on untiringly, right? And of course, the Buddha here is talking about the universal truth of impermanence, because that's the very first teaching that one needs to know. And then further, he goes on and he talks about, his body essentially. I can't remember if he's talking about his body here. I don't see it actually. He's just saying he's ripe in years, his lifespan is determined, and so forth and so on. Here's an interesting line where he says, guard your minds with well-collected thought, right? You're not interested in your mind just rambling and going all over the place. You'd like to have careful attention to any decisions that you're making, because you need to be able to understand the natural law of karma so well that you know that any decision that you make is going to produce a certain result, either wholesome or unwholesome. So you would like to have this well-collected thought with every decision that you're making. Let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is the last one for Volume 10, Chapter 46, the Tathagata's Final Passing. Okay, looks like Yihang has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. I feel like from the academic article you attached down there talking about the Tathagata's situation when, like, how he died, it looks like the Buddha was a bit unexpected about that situation. But then you talk about he was wisely to inform people 3 months ahead of his death, then that sounds more to me like he is aware of the death. How would this work? I was a bit confused.
Yeah, he was aware of his death 3 months in advance. But when he actually got to the point where his death was coming, it was pretty rapid, right? Like his body basically shut down, and it happened in a matter of hours. That he went from being fine to actually dying. So there was a lot of activity going on around that time, because they were trying to save his life, and they were trying to help him be comfortable as best as they could in his death, in terms of physical comfort. His mind would have been just fine, but his I'm sorry, somebody said I'm muted. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Robert. Let me start over. So while the Buddha did know 3 months in advance that he was going to die, when his death actually came, it was pretty quick and pretty sudden. That he basically died from his body breaking down. So he was basically healthy, and then in a matter of hours, he basically died. And there was a lot of activity going on around the time of his death, where the ordained practitioners that he was with were trying to help the physical body be as comfortable as possible as he entered into death, because his mind would have been completely calm and completely peaceful. But the people around him, if they weren't enlightened, they could have had a little bit of hastiness. And that might be what you're picking up on in the suttas when they're describing this. But it was not a surprise to the Buddha that he was going to die, because he knew 3 months in advance. But the exact moment of death, in the situation of death where the body was breaking down and he needed to deal with that physical pain, that's a challenge. But the mind is going to be able to reside peaceful and joyful during that period of time. But there's still going to be a certain amount of physical pain based on the way that the Buddha actually died. Okay. So Yihang, your hand's still up. Did you have any follow-up questions there?
Yeah, can I try to describe? So, because that just reminds me, I saw once you said, unfortunately, that you encountered that car crash accident, but actually the mind was interestingly beforehand knowing that situation or figured that out. I was just wondering if this is also how the Buddha's mind knows how when and how he will die, and then maybe when he is getting into that situation, I was thinking maybe he will, or his mind will know that this is the situation, I'm going to die, and then so maybe that maybe this is the interpretation that from the article that he's not expecting this situation happen, the death situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're picking up on, that you think that the Buddha didn't expect that he was going to die or know that he was going to die. I'm not quite sure where you're thinking that. And if it's the words of the author, that's the author speaking. But okay. I haven't seen anywhere where the Buddha was surprised by his death.
Okay. Yeah, could be the interpretation from the author. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we have a question coming in on Facebook from Mayu Lee. It says, "Teacher, I understand I have some craving for my boys to eat healthy food. When I see my boys eating unhealthy food, this mind experiences slight discontentedness. When this mind notices sensation through the 4 foundations of mindfulness, it would cut it off and reflect on impermanence and let it go. Also, I do what I can at home to supply and cook healthy food for them. Know that they will not always eat it. Any recommendations?" Yeah, you're doing the wise things. If you're able to have conversations with your boys and help them to understand wise decision making, that will help them to be able to eat healthier food. But them eating healthier food isn't actually going to solve your problem, right? If they ate healthy food every single day, which they're not going to do, that's still not going to solve your problem, because the problem is that the mind's craving for them to eat unhealthy food. So you're going to need to continue to do what you're doing, which is cut off and let go of any discontentedness that is arising. And then also the contemplation of death for your boys. You've learned that before. You might have even already done this before with for your children. You're going to need to do that multiple times until your mind lets go. So that's what's going to help your mind to get to the peace and joy, is eliminating the craving, desire, attachment, doing the death contemplation, cutting off and letting go anytime discontentedness is arising. But then, as a caring, concerned mom who doesn't have craving, desire, attachment, you can provide your boys with healthy food and have discussions with them to understand, wise decisions around eating healthy food. But these are 2 separate things, and it's all oftentimes wise to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment first, so that way your mind can eliminate that before you start talking to them in depth about healthy food. Because if you still have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, and you start talking to them about healthy food, that craving is going to come through. And now they're going to feel like they're being pushed and forced. And now they're going to actually turn away from it. They're going to dig their feet in, and you'll actually be less successful at helping them eat healthy, because your moral conduct is based in craving. So the more you just cut off and let go, put the healthy food out, cut off and let go, do the death contemplation, more and more, when you see that even when they're eating unhealthy food, your mind can maintain its peacefulness and joy, and you've noticed that for multiple weeks and months, that's when you might decide to start having conversations with them in a very calm and peaceful way, as a loving and caring mom, providing them guidance. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. All right, so I'm just going to end class here by thanking all of you guys for joining. I appreciate that you're interested in learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha. Thank you to everybody who's reading. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for everybody who's attended and just being interested to learn and practice these teachings. Next week, we're going to be moving into a new book, which is Volume 11, The Realms of Existence. The first several chapters are along the lines of what we've been studying so far in the group learning program, but eventually we're going to get into chapters that are about hell and afflicted spirits and the heavenly realm and all these other realms too. So it's pretty deep teachings. It's pretty interesting. It's a very thick book. It's probably the thickest book in the entire book series. It's about 150 chapters or so. So we're going to be in that book for many months as we're studying that particular book. So I encourage you to read it ahead of time because there's going to be a lot of details in there. But I'll also give you a heads up that, in terms of all the ins and outs of what the Buddha taught about those realms, you don't actually need to know all of that. If you understand what the 5 realms are and what those beings experience in those realms, which is what I teach in the group learning program, when we talk about, I think it's chapter 20, chapter 20, I think it is. That's essentially what you need to know about those realms. The Buddha is going to give you all kinds of details. So don't feel like you have to memorize those kinds of things, but you can just see the level of depth that he understood about these various realms. So you guys can move into that book at any point that you like. We're going to study the first 10 chapters, and then we're going to study 10 chapters every week until we move all the way through the entire book. Next class tomorrow on Sunday, I'm going to be starting the group learning program with the very first section of the Eightfold Path. I'm going to be teaching right view and right intention. So if you need a refresher on that, or if you've never learned that from me before, that would be a great opportunity for you to learn that. And then I'm going to be doing that over the next 3 Sundays, where I'm going to be doing each individual section, the wisdom section, moral conduct section, and the mental discipline section. And of course, on Wednesdays, I guide students in meditation, and then I open up to any and all questions that you guys have, because I'm building students up with the breathing mindfulness meditation with a 4-part series. And this Wednesday will be the second part of the 4-part series. So again, thank you all for attending, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee-ka.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.